Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. So, we got a ton of really interesting stuff from you guys this week, all about how young people are using tech today.
Yeah.
And it's honestly pretty fascinating. We've got a mix of things,
Mm.
surveys, expert analyses, some regional studies from France.
Cool.
So we're going to get like a really diverse look at things, I think.
Sounds good.
The big question we're going to try to tackle today is this whole idea of young people being digital natives,
Yeah.
right?
Yay.
Like, is that really the whole picture? Are they all effortlessly navigating the online world, or is there more to it?
It's definitely a big question. And I
Excellent.
think it's one that a lot of people are curious about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to kick things off, there's this one study I thought was super interesting. It was done by this digital expert, Luc Trunzler, in Occitanie, France.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you get a chance to look at that one?
I did, yeah. It was the one that kind of challenged some assumptions, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, he found that teenagers in this study, they weren't all obsessed with the latest smartphones,
Right.
Some of them even preferred older models.
Really?
Yeah, like the Nokia 3310.
Wow. That's going way back.
I know, right? Like, who would thought?
Yeah. I mean, it makes you think about what they're actually using the phones for.
Exactly. And it's not just the phones. They were using platforms like TikTok, but not necessarily in the way you might think.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, they were organizing videos into folders. They were following educational content creators.
Ah. So there's like a level of organization and intentionality there that we don't always associate with.
I know, right? It's not just mindless scrolling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely challenges the stereotype.
Totally. It's like maybe they're not as obsessed with constant connectivity as we think.
It does make you wonder.
It does. But, it's just one study. It's limited to a specific region and demographic.
Right, exactly.
So we have to keep that in mind.
So what about the bigger picture? Are there other studies that support this, or?
Yeah, so we actually have a few other studies from France, and they paint a bit of a different picture, which is interesting.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, they all agree that social media is a big part of young people's lives, like no surprise there.
Right.
But they also highlight these interesting variations in digital skills and even access to technology, especially when you factor in socioeconomic background.
Interesting. So it's not just about age then?
Not at all. It's
Yeah.
way more nuanced than that. And that actually brings us to this concept of the digital divide.
Ah, yeah, that's a big one.
It is. And I think it's important to understand what it really means.
Definitely. Because it's about more than just owning a smartphone.
Right. It's about the gap between those who have access to technology and the skills to use it effectively and those who don't.
Exactly. And that gap can have real consequences.
Totally. So I guess the question is, why should our listener care about this?
Right.
Like, what's the real world impact?
Well, think about it. Almost everything is moving online these days, right?
It really is.
Education, job opportunities, even just staying connected with people.
Yeah.
It all relies on technology to some extent.
So someone without those skills is at a disadvantage.
Definitely. One of the sources we looked at mentioned that 57% of job offers on France Travail, that's a major job board in France, they're basically inaccessible to people who lack basic digital skills.
Wow. That's more than half the available jobs.
It is. And the pandemic, that really highlighted this issue.
Oh, yeah.
Think about that sudden shift to online learning.
Right. Some kids thrived in that environment, but others really struggled.
Exactly. And it's because they didn't have the same access or the skills to adapt.
So it's almost like the pandemic amplified the inequalities that already existed.
It did. It created a whole new set of challenges for young people who are already facing barriers.
It's really eye-opening when you think about it. It makes you realize how critical these skills are, not just for individuals, but for society as a whole.
Absolutely. It's about equity and fairness and making sure everyone has a chance to succeed in this increasingly digital world. Yeah, it's a big issue for sure.
And it's interesting, right? We started talking about this digital native idea,
Right.
but it seems like there's actually a lot of variation within that generation.
Oh, absolutely. It's way more nuanced than just saying all young people are tech savvy.
Right. Some are super skilled in using tech in these incredible ways, but others are struggling just to keep up.
Exactly. And for some, it's not even about struggling. It's just they're not interested. They'd rather be doing other things.
Right, exactly. It's about choice, too. It almost makes you wonder if that digital native label is even helpful anymore.
Yeah, I think it's becoming less useful. It creates this oversimplified view of something that's really complex.
Right.
And I think we need to move beyond these broad generalizations and actually look at the individual experiences of young people.
Totally. It's not just about age, it's about access, skills, opportunity.
Exactly. And that's why this digital divide is such a crucial issue to talk about.
Mm,
It's not just a tech problem, it's a social and economic problem with real consequences.
for sure. Okay, so we've talked about the research, we've talked about the digital divide,
Right.
but what about the young people themselves? Like, what are their actual experiences like?
Well, one of the sources we looked at actually included a quote from a young person, and it really stuck with me.
Oh, interesting. What did they say?
They said, I love being connected, but it can feel overwhelming sometimes. It's like everyone's watching you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I can relate to that feeling. Definitely.
Right. It's like that double-edged sword of social media.
Totally. You want to be connected. You want to be part of things.
Mm.
But it can also feel like a lot of pressure.
And for young people, they're still figuring themselves out.
Right.
So that pressure can be even more intense for them.
Exactly. They're bombarded with all these messages, and it can really impact their self-esteem, their body image.
Yeah, and then you have things like cyberbullying, which can have devastating effects.
Oh, absolutely. The online world can be a really tough place, especially for young people.
It's true. They're exposed to risks that previous generations never even had to think about.
Right. So it's a lot to navigate. I guess the question is, how do we help them? How do we make sure they have the tools to thrive in this digital age?
Well, I think it starts with education.
Mm.
We need to teach them not just the technical skills,
Hmm.
but the critical thinking skills they need to really evaluate information online.
Right. Like how to spot fake news, how to protect their privacy.
Exactly. And how to recognize and avoid harmful content.
So it's about digital literacy, but in the broadest sense.
Exactly. It's about empowering them to be responsible digital citizens.
And that takes a village, right? It's not just on schools or parents.
Oh, absolutely. It's a shared responsibility. Parents, educators, policymakers, even tech companies, we all have a role to play.
It's about creating a digital environment that's actually safe and supportive for young people.
Exactly, because ultimately we want them to be able to use this incredible power of technology for good,
Mm-hmm.
to create positive change in their lives and in the world.
Speaking of positive change,
Mhm.
we've talked a lot about the challenges,
Right.
but we can't forget about all the amazing things young people are doing online, too.
Oh, for sure. They're building businesses, they're connecting with people across the globe.
They're advocating for causes they care about.
Yeah, it's really inspiring to see.
It is. Their creativity and their resilience gives me hope for the future, honestly.
Me too. It reminds us that technology, when used thoughtfully and responsibly,
Mhm.
it can be a powerful force for good.
Absolutely. So as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah,
I think it's safe to say that this whole digital native myth has been thoroughly debunked.
I think we can agree on that.
But what we've gained is a much richer, more nuanced understanding of how young people are really interacting with technology.
And a deeper appreciation for the challenges they face in this constantly evolving digital world.
Right. It's a lot to think about. Yeah, it really is. We've come a long way from that simple idea of digital natives to this much more complex understanding of how young people are actually engaging with tech.
And that complexity is what makes it so interesting, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's not just about the gadgets themselves, it's about all these other factors.
Right, like the social and economic stuff we talked about.
Exactly. Even the psychological aspects,
For sure. Like how it impacts their mental health, their self-esteem.
all of that. It really highlights how technology is never neutral.
Yeah, it's a tool,
And like any tool, it can be used in different ways.
for good or for bad.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, what are some of the big takeaways you think our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, I think the first thing is to remember that digital native, it's just not that simple.
Right. It's a myth.
Young people, they're not all the same. They have different needs, different experiences when it comes to tech.
So we can't treat them as one big group.
Exactly. And we can't assume they're all equally equipped to handle the online world. Some need more support than others.
Okay, so how do we make sure all young people have the chance to succeed in this digital age?
Well, we have to start by acknowledging that access to tech and digital skills, those are essential for participating in society these days.
It's almost like a basic right, isn't it?
I think you could argue that, yeah.
Yeah.
So that means we need to be investing in ways to bridge that digital divide, Make sure everyone has affordable internet, devices, digital literacy programs.
And not just the technical stuff, right?
Right, like you said earlier, critical thinking is huge.
Being able to evaluate information, protect their privacy, be responsible digital citizens,
It's about giving them the tools and knowledge they need to navigate this whole digital world safely.
and it takes all of us, right? It's not just on parents or
Oh,
teachers.
absolutely. It's a team effort. Parents, educators, policymakers, tech companies, we all have a part to play.
We need to work together to create an online environment that's safe and supportive for young people,
I couldn't agree more. It's about the future, really.
preparing them for what's ahead. Well, this has been a really thought-provoking conversation. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to everyone listening, keep exploring this topic, Talk to the young people in your life, ask them questions, stay engaged. Their voices matter.
They do.
It's about building a digital future that works for everyone. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.